Continuing on our quest to build out this new world we've created. A similar party, one moment please. Seriously kids, don't get addicted to things. It's cheaper than smoking, but not by much. A similar party to those that went north have gathered and prepared to leave the northeast gate of Texta. I will note here that the distances traveled do not constitute a hard march. These folks and the ones who went north are not forcing themselves to achieve distance. They're not making 30 miles a day. It's more likely they'll be doing half of that or less. Due to their purpose of exploration, they'll be stopping and recording everything they can, everywhere they can. Over the course of 6 months, they might likely travel about 1,800 miles, depending on terrain and on how much there is for them to explore and record. Good jump. Mountains or swamps could obviously shorten this distance considerably, as would population centers where there's more to write about. In any case, they leave on their journey heading northeast, though through similar initial plains and scrublands as the northward crew, though this time heading toward deeper forested hills with no sign of cities in the distance, only a seldom cottage or campfires or small farmsteads scattered about. It seems Texta sits at the border between the temperate and subtropical on this world. So the weather will get progressively colder as they travel, though not so starkly as for those that went north. Most of their encounters for the first few months are recording various plants, trees, and wildlife. Occasionally they will come across the aforementioned lone cottages and farmsteads, housing various peoples, each with their own version of recent events and differing perspectives on all of their neighbors. Most are excited to have visitors and to trade news. Yeah? Is that right? Yeah, I know. I'll get to it. Some few even try to entice these strangers to stay longer. They meet orcs, gnomes, halflings, humans, and even a small goblin tribe, the last of which was decidedly unpleasant and costly to encounter. Their reverence for the god of the host was also rather unnerving to any goblins from Texta. They also find the remains of campsites from various peoples' hunting trips and other forays into the wilderness. They find no actual roads through the region, just rough trackways here and there in various directions. The terrain is rough, though passable, once under the canopy of the forest. There is little flat ground by this point. The hills grow larger, diminishing the view to the distance in any direction as the party crosses valleys between the hills. Where the hell am I? Okay. Eventually, as the land begins to flatten out again, they reach an actual road. This turns out to be a marked border between two kingdoms. On the southern and more westerly side of this road, the forests are partially cleared and farm fields worked by human laborers and ox-drawn plows. On the northern and easterly side, northern and more westerly side, southern and more easterly, northern and more westerly. The trees are far more lush and dense. I'm sure you don't want to hear my neighbor's kid screaming in the driveway. Where was I? Yes, the northern and more westerly northern and more easterly. No, northern and more westerly, yes. Okay. The northern and more westerly side, the trees are far more lush and dense. Through conversing with the human peasants, our explorers are told that the forest belongs to an elf kingdom. Peaceable so far as the humans can surmise, but fiercely defensive of their borders and their trees. It's told that very little travel and little trade occurs between the two realms, but for medicine coming from the elves paid for in hard currency. Seeking out any authority figure they can, our party manages to find audience with a minor baron and a sheriff among the humans. They're housed in a small stone keep, a rough one-day travel into the kingdom from this road. Meager though passable and enthusiastic hospitality is given them. They find that the kingdom is called Flumen, and that it was settled initially because of the presence of many rivers which both irrigate their fields and allow swift transport of both goods and people to distant places. They are also warned against visiting the elves. The Baron insists that they are secretive and untrusting of strangers, stating that some who have entered their lands uninvited have never returned. He graciously accepts news of Texta's existence and promises to send word to the Queen and her court as quickly as possible in hopes of future trade. The party discovers that the economy here is diverse, built on fishing and hunting, the farm produce and timber, most of which go south along rivers to other lands, though some portion is kept within the kingdom and traded between the various noble land holdings and the crown. Word is more swift than expected, and the party is soon summoned to an audience with one of the Queen's advisors. Here, much information is repeated, but an exchange is made. Maps. Flumen offers to make copies of their maps and the surrounding areas, and the kingdom itself, in exchange for copies of a map of Texta and of the route which the party has traveled thus far. It being a fair exchange, the party agrees. They also learn the kingdom's system of government, inheritance, and bureaucracy. The various castes of the people and the wants, needs, and surpluses that Flumen has. They have no standing army. If the need arises for such, the peasants might be conscripted to fight, but for the most part there are a few titled knights, a few sheriffs patrolling the lands, and not much else. It's a feudal system, very different from what goes on in Texta. After their meeting, and trading maps, and against the advice of Flumen, the party heads towards the elves. Much to their surprise, they discover they are expected. A group of armored, and highly polished elves greet them only an hour inside the tree line, knowing their names. They cordially offer to escort them to an audience with the royal court. Having little option, of course, the party will acquiesce. What do you want? En route through the forest, our explorers see a very few other elves and much more wildlife. They can hear birds in the trees and spy deer, foxes, rabbits, and bears calmly wandering, paying no mind to their or the elves' presence. The trees become larger the deeper they go into the woodland, eventually towering higher than they could accurately surmise. Among these giants, the party catches brief glimpses of beasts, rarer, almost mythical. Was that a unicorn? Might that have been a fawn? While they wonder such things, they notice wooden walkways, bridges and platforms high in the trees, some even grown out of the trees, it would seem. Elves traversing these paths, occasionally glancing down at them in curiosity. They are led to the base of what is definitely the largest tree any of them has ever seen. Before them on the open ground are a half-dozen high-backed gilded thrones, each holding the form of a very old elf, flanked by a pair of armed guards. Their escort announces them as explorers and sages from the ancient poisoned lands. You're fine. I'll pay attention to you later. The ancient poisoned lands, far to the southwest, now called Texta. He introduces King Wayskara and the Council of Elders, before taking his leave and disappearing into the surrounding wilderness. The king and the elders are polite, though terse and direct. They are not interested in trade of any kind. They are, however, interested in information. Not maps, but history. They want to know how and why what have long been known as cursed and poisoned lands that could not be settled have for centuries now accepted the presence of the Textan peoples. Not only without killing them, but allowing and possibly even aiding their thriving. They wonder what common thread might carry through those that have successfully settled in such an inhospitable place. The party learns that this king has lived close to 1,000 years. In his father's youth, Texta was founded. Within his life, their nation had grown and expanded to its current borders. The party might offer all they know on the matter, but it is little. In exchange, this king of the elves promises to correspond with the Gwens and historians of Texta, furthering a more complete knowledge of the subject for both. With this declaration of intent, the escort returns and guides the explorers back to the border road. They are gifted provision for their travel homeward, handed a letter of intent meant for the Great Gwen and the Imperatrix, and sent on their way. I wouldn't suggest this section of exploration be run as a campaign. For a campaign, you need three things. You need a problem that can be resolved by the party in a reasonable amount of time. You need recurring interference like combat, puzzles, some kind of tangible reward. Or puzzles. Things that can be overcome by the player characters. And you need a prize at the end. You need some kind of a tangible reward, like I misread earlier. Some DMs even like to have all three of these things set up for each encounter, especially in like a 5-room dungeon or a one-shot. This doesn't really provide any of that. So in my opinion, it's better to leave this part of the map as lore. At least during this exploration phase, building out our world. Later on, down the line, we could expand on what information the elves' several thousand-year written history might give to the leadership in Texta, like why the lands were considered cursed so long ago. The elves might realize that all the settler groups in Texta, both inside the mountain and on the land surrounding the mountain, inside the borders, what they have in common. Not just that they're all small creatures, but that they're all refugees. They were all running from something and looking for safety. I don't know what that might amount to for the elves' perspective, because I haven't written it yet. But that should do it for today. Next week we can find out what can be found to the east of Texta. As always, like, share, comment, and subscribe. I'll talk to you next time.